Politics Unplugged is on the road in Dallas for the P3 conference. Think you don't know what a public-private partnership is? Well, think about the new toll road on Highway 36 between Denver and Boulder. So what are we doing in Dallas? Well, the keynote speakers include Denver Mayor Michael Hancock and Governor John Hickenlooper. And we want to know what they're saying in Dallas that could impact us in Colorado.
Please help me welcome Governor John Hickenlooper.
In Dallas, Governor John Hickenlooper spoke at the P3 conference. P3 is how US 36 was just expanded and tolled from Denver to Boulder. What it is contracting with a private company to build and manage the project, while that private company takes on the long-term risk. And in the case of US 36, they also get to keep the toll revenue.
A lot of the public pushed back dramatically and said, you know, we were locked out, we didn't hear about this.
I didn't get an answer to my question.
They're covering this up.
The state took a major PR hit with US 36. The public fought back in packed meetings.
Because by then, you're screwed.
Once they realized the HOV will change in 2017 to 3 people per car, and that a private company would run the road for 50 years.
We need to be really proactive in explaining, not to those public officials, but to the folks they represent, what this is. We learned that lesson the hard way.
David Spector runs P3 projects for CDOT. He pointed out the transparency changes because of US 36. CDOT now posts documents online, including the bidding process and contract summaries.
I don't want people to have misconceptions and freak out potential bidders. We do keep all of the proprietary information confidential, and we hold all that back. But what we've been able to do is we'll say, here's when we can release some of that data that would otherwise be, protectable under our open records laws.
At the Capitol, lawmakers are considering a bonding bill, asking voters to approve a $3.5 billion loan to pay for transportation projects. Is it P3 or bonding? Is it one or the other?
No, I think you need P3 and bonding. P3 helps you do it for less money, but it doesn't do the whole thing. It just doesn't.
From Dallas to our Denver studios. Joining us today to discuss the issue is State Senator Matt Jones, who represents Louisville and Boulder County, has been a critic of these public-private partnerships. We'll also hear more from CDOT's David Spector, the director of the High Performance Transportation Enterprise, more on what he said in Dallas about lessons learned and transparency. Senator, first, thanks for being here in the studio.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Has your stance softened at all in the year and a half since we really heard a lot of anger about the US 36 project?
It softened some, yes, but at the end of the day, we need more money for roads. That's the bottom line. And these deals are dangerous. They are done in back rooms. They are not accountable. If you have a problem on US 36 and you make a call, who do you call? Melbourne, Australia, LA, or do you call your state representative who can't do much of anything? And the bottom line, people need to understand they're going to have to pay for these roads one way or the other. They have a choice whether they're going to pay a toll or they're going to pay revenue to the transportation department to build roads that are open so you can find out what's going on with them, they're accountable, and they know what's going on.
So as we look at the I-70 project near the Denver Coliseum, that would be a P3. It would not have a toll lane. Is there something wrong or better that once you take the toll out of it?
Well, like I said, the transparency is not there. There's no accountability. When somebody goes off, they've done some improvements, but when they go into the back room and do these deals, they are doing them in secret. That's how we learned in US 36 how our deal was 50 years long. It's not only our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren have to deal with it. We also learned that they put 4% down, paid a third of the cost, and the taxpayers picked up the other 2/3.
On that point, let's listen to something David Spector said at the P3 conference in Dallas. He is the person at CDOT who oversees P3 decisions. He talked about hesitant lawmakers. Here's what he said.
Sometimes when we walk into the public officials or the elected officials, we can sound like the infomercial on TV. Boy, have I got a deal for you. Mm-hmm. And if you buy now with this P3, I'll throw in a set of Ginsu knives. There's a risk involved. And if that project goes south for some reason, that can turn into political risk really, really quickly. And that political risk turns into an elected official losing their job and getting voted out of office. And I think that because P3s are misunderstood or not understood well enough, I think that personal election risk can be internalized a lot.
Senator, it was popular to be on the opposite side of P3s. Was that for political clout?
No. You talk to my constituents, you can still talk to them in the grocery store. They're mad about what happened. They didn't know what was going on. The legislators didn't know what was going on. I was on the Transportation Committee, and it was too late when I was told about the carpool going to 3, and it was too late when they'd already signed a deal when we found out it was a 50-year deal.
I know a lot of people angry about the carpool going from 2 to 3. Now, you passed a bill that would require future P3s to be scrutinized by the legislature, and if it met if it was high dollar, like pretty much any of them, it would have to reach the approval of lawmakers. Now, the governor vetoed that bill, but since then, CDOT has added more transparency to its website, as you saw in the story, putting more documents online. Does the transparency help, even though the bill was vetoed?
Oh, sure, it's better. But at the end of the day, they go into a room and do a negotiation that nobody can be at. It's secret. And if we were doing this, if it were our road, if we were paying for it, they wouldn't go into the back of the room. They'd break up these contracts. They'd bid them out. Everybody would know what's going on.
Okay. Should we know more about that? I mean, there is proprietary, as David Spector was saying, but is there, in any deal, does the public deserve to know everything? I know, as a journalist, I want to know it all, but does the public deserve to know A to Z?
Well, if it's a US 36 project at $500 million, you need to know almost all of it. If it's even more for I-70 into the mountains, you need to know all of it.
All right, so David Spector talked about that transparency in Dallas to warn other states about what they may run into with P3s. Here's more about where the transparency issue came from CDOT's perspective.
You have to acknowledge it up front. I mean, yes, the private sector is going to make money on this transaction. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it, right? I mean, that's part of the point for them. But it's yes and we as the public sector get a real tangible benefit from this kind of arrangement, right? We build in the whole life cycle cost of the asset to the price of the structure. We're getting a lot more value for our money because we're thinking about it over the course of 50 years instead of just building something and then trying to figure out how we're going to pay for it later on. And I think we just really have to be upfront about it.
His sentiment is, if you try to build a road and then have to maintain it over 50 years, it's going to cost this much. But if we do this P3, it may cost us this much. So if we don't have P3, how do we pay for the roads that we need?
Well, let's talk about the US 36 deal. They literally only put 4% down on their highway and have it for 50 years. They assumed a third of the debt, and the taxpayers picked up 2/3 of that debt. If you wanted a mortgage for your house, would you love that deal?
Sure, why not?
Absolutely, you would love that deal. It's not that good a deal. And the fact is, we have options. We have revenue that we need to bring in so that we have accountability and transparency and not have to go to a back room to do a deal.
Well, I know there are plenty of Republicans at the state capitol that would argue that we don't have the revenue, and if we did have the revenue, it should be refunded back to taxpayers. So as we talk about public-private partnerships, the alternatives, I guess, would be budgeting differently, cutting from somewhere else, or increasing taxes in some way. Also in Dallas was Governor John Hickenlooper, and I was able to ask him, if not P3, what about a gas tax? Here's what he said.
It's tricky. That's a real tricky one. I'd rather go and keep the same tax but put it on a percentage so that when the cost of gasoline comes down, the tax goes down. When the cost of gasoline goes up, the cost goes up. So it would, most taxes we have are percentages. So a flat tax per gallon seems kind of old-fashioned.
This is an unpopular idea because you'd have to get to the voters to approve hiking a gas tax. But
Right.
is what we have now good? I mean, it's either budget cuts or increase the 22-cent per gallon state gas tax. That's what it seems like our two options might be.
Well, actually, there are more options. Number one, there's a fee that's paid by hospitals that we could use that right now, through a budget limitation that we could change, we can't use that money. It'd be $100 million, $200 million. Secondly, at the ballot this November, people will have a chance probably to vote on whether the state can keep all the revenue it brings in, not any new taxes, all it brings in. And they can do that, and that's also additional money for this. And then people need to make a choice. Do I want to have these deals that are not accountable, that have poor transparency for the same road, or do I want to pay up front? And if they want to pay a toll, and if they want to deal with the lack of transparency, that's their choice. For me, I like paying for things up front. I'm a cheapskate that way. I think we should level with people, tell them what things cost, and then have the question asked.
Now, I asked the governor about P3 or this bonding bill that we may vote on, that if we could give the state permission for a $3.5 billion loan, would we really need P3? And he told me, you need both. We don't have enough with one or the other. Do you agree with that?
Well, the bond is a problem. If you bond more, you won't have enough to keep up your roads. So that, to me, is a non-starter. We had a bill like that last year. I voted against it. For me, I think you go to the ballot and tell the people the story. I trust people to make the right decision on this. And if they want to pay tolls and if they want to deal with the lack of transparency, fine. Otherwise, they should say, okay, a gas tax, sales tax, whatever it may be that's on the ballot. I can live with that, and I'd rather do it that way than have these private deals.
One-word answer. Have you ever used the US 36 toll lane?
I've used the part that was already there.
Okay. Senator Matt Jones, thanks for joining us in studio, and you heard David Spector from CDOT from Dallas. Stay with us. Politics Unplugged. We'll be right back.